2008, they haven't done it yet, take a hard look at how you're creating the content and pull back and go, how would I do it if I was doing it on the web? And that will start to give you some of the inklings into how fast can I transform into other things. Because again, it's as simple as a separation. This is the content, this is the styling. An easy analogy for that, back to the newspaper example, writers don't usually format their own content, right? So your journals, they submit the content and then the designers apply the style. It's exactly the same thing, but now they're separate technical things. This is now the text content, image content, and so on.
How many of you think you're fine with your content? Raise your hands.
Oh, no.
Okay, everybody's in trouble. Good, no. We've talked about, a few different potential learning platforms here that, from the folks who are up here, Google Apps, various blogs, wikis, turning print, Ma and Pa Kindle, as I think of them now. I will not say which is which. What I'm curious about, though, what other learning platforms should we be considering? Should we be considering, iPhones obviously, but other types of mobile devices, other things that we're just not thinking about? And will there be a hierarchy or sharing of information across devices of some of the same educational content and collaboration? Jeff, do you want to start with that?
Yeah. I think there's lots of devices to look at. I think it's actually a struggle to think about how you do that in a scalable way because there's just so darn many of them. I've got my iPhone, I've got my Google phone, I've got my Kindle. I'm a complex use case and I'm just one guy. But I do think that we're going to have to look at all of them. And I think the secret is in what we were talking about in terms of abstracting away the content from the presentation. Because to the extent you do that, it becomes very easy to say, I've got content, I want to put it on an iPhone, here's the styling for iPhone, go. And I know that all my content that's stored in this way, I can now publish to any of those devices. So we absolutely have to think about those devices, the different ways people interact with it. I think there's places on the web that are going to become very valuable educational platforms. Stanford is now hosting office hours in Facebook. I don't know if anybody else read this article, but they're actually using Facebook to host office hours. Now, I still know exactly what I think of Facebook, and, personally, and Twitter is a whole different thing. But I think the reality is these different platforms are emerging. Is anybody live twittering this? I tweeted one myself, but then I've been speaking, so it's been tougher.
This is why I'm not live tweeting it.
Yeah, you can just tweet at the end. But I think all those platforms are going to emerge, and they're going to continue to evolve quickly. And so there's a bit of a wait and see. You'll see things that take off and crash that may not be useful. But when things reach a certain critical mass, you need to be able to hop in quickly. And the reality of technology is today that critical mass comes quickly. 35% of sales of books that are available on Kindle and print are sold on Kindle in 18 months. That's not a very long period of time to reach critical mass for a new technology. And so we have to be prepared to not know what that technology is and to take advantage of it as it evolves.
And I would sort of add on that. So for Kindle, we knew it was important to make sure that people could get to their books no matter what device they wanted to read on. And so, we announced a while ago that we would be coming to multiple platforms to be able to read your library selection. And so today we're out on the iPhone. So what happens is if I'm at home and I'm reading on this Kindle and I go to the grocery store, I stop on page 10. And I go to the grocery store and I'm standing in line and I have my iPhone with me and there's a long line. I can open up my iPhone and it knows exactly where I was and I can read 3 pages. And I can turn it off and I can go to work and pick up my other Kindle and it will be exactly where I left off in the grocery store. And so you're constantly, the devices are connected and talking to each other so that you always have your books at your fingertips. And so iPhone's the beginning, but we will be on more platforms to come. And I think that's absolutely critical. Back to sort of one other thing, just to not panic, because since nobody raised their hand that their content was at all sort of where it needed to be. There are ways to take the old-fashioned files, even the old-fashioned book in physical form, and get it into digital. We do that for publishers at Amazon, so we will actually take their books and, listen, reading device doesn't work unless you have books that people want to read. And not every book that people want to read is going to be produced from this point forward. And so it's important to be able to go back and add selection from that was, produced 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever it may be. And so there are ways to make it work. It's not easy. Amazon will do that for publishers, or publishers can work with others to do that. So I just don't want to scare everyone in the room immediately.
Okay, who's not scared? Raise your hands. If you're not scared, raise your hands. Okay, good. And I will be taking questions in a minute here. Michael? Yeah.
Well, two notes. I guess one, since you addressed that well, I didn't mean to put fear into anyone. The reality of being able to transform the content, what I probably should have framed it is you have limits to how far you can transform it. So it was built, in that my core 3-3-1 example, whatever. I can take that and go this far. I can't do everything. So the full flexibility of that, that's where it takes a retooling of that content. But the other piece, the common theme to all of this, whether it's certainly the entire world in which Jeff existed, but also the role of one Kindle talking to another Kindle or another device, is the web. The web is the connector that the current students at all ages have never known the world without. For them, the constant ability to be able to connect to one another, to connect content, is just part of life. And that's what we're really talking about here in terms of now the content, talking about the content.
And books are reading each other, which is remarkable.
I'll break down an oft-used term, but I think it'll make sense to you in this context, which is cloud computing. We hear a lot of this cloud computing. What cloud computing really means is my content is in the net, and no matter where I connect to it from, I don't care. One of my Kindles, my iPhone, my Android phone, my BlackBerry, my PC, my friend's PC in the dorm room, I have access to my content, the ability to share, the ability to communicate across and about that content seamlessly. And that's really, when we talk about cloud computing, it's really that concept that when the content lives in a single place and is accessed by multiple devices, there's a power that emerges in my ability to interact with it where I want, when I want, how I want, and to interact with other people about that content. And that's really what we see as a lot of the power of the coming world of cloud computing, is that it unlocks a lot of capabilities when the physical is no longer a limitation for how we interact with and communicate about content. It really breaks down a lot of barriers.
All right, I'm going to have these folks think about a question to answer later, which is, what's the worst example you've ever seen of a publisher trying to do this and has done it badly? No naming of names, but we don't name publishers, but I'm curious about what lessons were learned from that experience that you can share in a moment. But we have a question back there, and I guess I have to repeat the questions for the recording device in the cloud. Actually, John, right behind you was a woman there, then I'll get to you. All right. Love Laserdisc, probably, yeah.
So I'm just really curious for advice about what would you do in order to sort of bridge this gap, concretely speaking.
All right, let me try to repeat that. By the way, I kind of feel like when you're watching a foreign language film and there are